All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the One Day Closer podcast. I am your host, Jay. And instead of some big crazy recap, we are going to jump straight into it because today is the return of Christy. All right. Hey, baby.
Hey, y'all.
All right. Now, the cool part about this is that you are calling from Alaska. BFE, Alaska. And
Currently in Dutch Harbor.
yeah. Sending love from Dutch Harbor. So thanks for taking a break on your workday. For everybody's, Christy's 3 hours behind our central time here, so she is on her lunch break, and we're gonna monopolize some of that time today. So thanks again, baby, for getting us all worked out on your busy day. People have been clamoring.
Okay.
They want to hear what you got to say.
All right.
So, our last episode, we finished, our only episode, right? We had finished, we were talking about my first hospitalization. And before we get into that too, though, one of the things I got a lot of feedback on was, your take on a caregiver, right? And how much it takes its toll on caregivers. And of course, we've got a good friend of ours whose husband is fighting cancer right now and just had surgery. And man, she called and messaged me and she's like, whew, tell Christy she is right on. She's just talking about how hard it is taking care of them. So thank you for that. And of course, anything you want to share when it comes to stuff like that, definitely interject that too. But so going back, we left off, we were talking about all the strings we pulled, right? We had to get admitted. It was COVID. Hospitals were full. And we pulled every string we could. And you were able to get me admitted. So what's your memories from there?
Okay, so we were able to get you admitted. I remember taking you to the hospital, and when COVID was first starting and everybody was on lockdown. So we knew you were going to be admitted for 5 days for IVIG therapy. And I was not allowed to go in with you because of COVID. So I had to drop you off at the emergency room and see them take you to registration and get up to your room. And then I had to go home.
It's like just abandoning. It's like leaving a baby at the hospital at that point.
Kind of was like leaving a baby at the hospital. Yeah, I was not happy about this. But I was trying to abide by the rules. Trying.
Yeah, well, you did good for most of the time on that.
Most of the time I did. He starts getting therapy. And
that was the first rounds of IVIG, right? It was the first time I was getting that.
Yeah. And it was on the weekend, so I wasn't even at work. So all of our conversations were like by phone. And it was just like, he got his IVIG and he had like a terrible headache.
It was, oh my God, worst headache ever, actually. I never want to have one like that again.
So after his first dose of IVIG and his terrible headache, he basically was like, okay, I'll just talk to you later because I've got this bad headache, so I'm going to lay down and see if that helps with my pain. So he did, and, we talked that night, and again, it was very difficult for me not being there to see what was going on and to know what was going on, but just be away. So Sunday rolls around, it's the same thing. He gets his IVIG. He doesn't really have as bad a headache as he did the day before, but he still is just not really feeling well. So Monday rolls around. Well, Monday I go to work, and I work in a building attached to the hospital.
Yeah, at the time you were working at the clinic next door, yeah.
Right. So our clinic was adjacent to the hospital. So I may or may not have put on my lab coat and just walked over to the hospital and walked through so I could go see Jay. If I would have.
Hypothetically.
He's sitting up on the bed. Hypothetically. He's sitting up on the side of the bed and I mean, I guess as far as like motor function, it was okay. And he's still getting his IVIG, and that week was just a very long week because it literally was just him in the hospital, IVIG
Every
daily,
day,
and then
yeah.
him resting
Yeah.
every day. He would take these long naps, and I was working, and then I couldn't stay with him, so I would go check in on him during the day, hypothetically,
Yeah.
and um, then I could go back to work and resume my day as if everything was fine because got a patient to take care of, so can't let my problems become their problems.
Yeah.
So that was a hard week, and then finally he started having this improvement, like really big improvement in his motor function. So like this is great. This is what it is. We nailed it. GBS, we got our IVIG, everything's good.
Yeah.
So we get discharged and we go.
I was going to say one of the things I remember about that week, I think it was on like day 3. I remember, you were talking about you came in, I was sitting on side the bed. I remember, of course, I shouldn't have did it, but I got up and walked to the bathroom, without calling the nurse for help. Not that I would do anything like that. And
No, not at all.
and it'd be a fall risk, right? And in hindsight, that was so stupid on my part. And if you ever go to the hospital, people do not do that. Call for help. But I remember
Yeah.
like the medicine by the 3rd day, I was able to stand and waddle to the bathroom and take a whiz, and I just like said it, like you were just saying. I mean, like, hey, man, things went good, right? We did the what 5? I thought it was 7 treatments, but I guess it was 5 treatments over 7 days or something.
Those 5 treatments over 7 days.
Yeah, and of course, we know now that those headaches are come standard with the IVIG. Except now I just hydrate real good. They couldn't have told me that one in advance, to like, hey, let's get you hydrated and it'll help with the worst headache you've ever had. So yeah, we get discharged. You come out and jailbreak me out of there.
Yep, come and jailbreak him out. And again, still not allowed in. So actually, a couple of coworkers that I knew saw us, and they came over. And anyway, we rolled him out, got him into the car. They helped me get him into the car, and we were like, "Okay, woohoo, we're going home." And we had been given an order for some home physical therapy just to continue. And he's improving, and everything's looking great. So go home and try to resume life as best we can. Physical therapist comes out, and he's very confident in his ability to have Jay up walking again. And I am not confident at all in his ability to have Jay up and walking again.
I wish I would have had his confidence. Yes, he was. He just what he told me had me walking in 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, you'll be walking in 2 to 3 weeks, no problem." And I'm like, okay. So I was trying not to be skeptical. I was trying to be positive. But I really just want to say, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about. I did not. I just let him do his thing, and he gave Jay these exercises. And I'm sure home physical therapy works for some people, but I do not recommend it. You need to go to an outpatient physical therapy center or inpatient therapy.
Definitely.
Side note.
Definitely a difference. Yeah, I mean, like I said, no knock against him or the concept, right? But especially when it comes to these crazy diseases. I mean, it's it's just like anything. It's getting the appropriate level of care for the illness.
Right. I mean, I'm not knocking him at all. Like it was just not the right thing for us to do. Of course, nobody knew that. We all thought he was improving and everything was fine. And
well, I did, right? Over, let's say, we did the 7 days at the hospital, and we started the physical therapy. And by like day 9 or 10, I actually was able to go back to work. As an office job, but I was able to go back to work. I guess this would have been somewhere around like January 19th of 21, which is hard to believe we're in January of 25 talking about it.
I know, crazy.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, all of us, right? Me, you, heck, the neuro. We thought, son of a gun. We may have this under control. And
right.
And then thought,
we did.
Oh boy, how naive we were back then, right? And
I know.
What they say, ignorance is bliss. And
ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. So we're struggling through it, but like I said, I'm able to walk. I'm able to use my arms and hands a little bit, and like I said, I go back to work. And what it was like day 2 of being back at work, and because I remember calling you because my hand started cramping again. Like, deja vu. We've been down this road before. And a couple hours later, I couldn't even walk out the building hardly. I still never forget the look on that poor security guy's face. When I was trying to walk out, I wish I could remember his name, but I was doing like we talked about when, oh gosh, at the casino, right? When we talked about the Frankenstein walk, where it was just everything I could do to
Right.
lift the legs. So I'm walking past
Yeah.
him super slow, probably grunting. I don't think I was crying or nothing, but just straining to walk. And I remember him looking at me and he's like, "Man, are you okay?" Which my response was no. And of course, he wanted to get a wheelchair for me, and I turned it down. I should have. Again, hindsight's 2020. And I made it to the car, made it home, and then we called neuro. Right, and that's another one of those calls that Dr. Markle's nurse had to run for cover uh, with Mrs. Fassbender calling back.
Yeah. Yeah. I gave her a hard time. I really did.
Yeah, but
Not
no, it was not in a
not a
bad
hard
way.
time. I can be rude. I was very insistent and
Yes.
very like, what are we doing? I just didn't let things go by the wayside.
Yeah, and then that is for
So,
caregivers, right? For caregivers that need to be an advocate for the patient.
you know,
Um,
yeah, you have to be an advocate for the patient. So sometimes you come out looking like the mean one, or the unpleasant one, the not so nice one. But really, you're just trying to do what's best for your you know loved one that you have that you're trying to take care of. So in a lot of aspects, actually going through this, I approach caregivers in a whole different light. So anyway,
it's made you a better
so I went
provider, huh?
home. It did make me a better provider, absolutely.
Yeah.
I can definitely see things from a lot of different perspectives. Uh, so he comes home that day, we called neuro, and we're like, what are we going to do? So he was like, okay, well, we'll readmit you. Okay. So we're going to readmit and do what? And he's like, we'll do some IVIG, but he wanted to do some plasma exchange.
Woohoo!
And we're like,
Plasma exchange
okay,
rocks, huh?
right. So at this point, it's like, okay, it's probably not GBS, but we don't know what it is, because it improved and then got better, got worse. And typically, that's not a typical pattern of GBS.
Yeah.
So got him readmitted again, and this time he literally was in a wheelchair. He wasn't able to do much of anything.
No. We went downhill. We
I
started
remember
going downhill quick at that point.
he went downhill really quick, and it was really fast. And like the change went from being able to kind of walk to like literally being in a wheelchair, and me getting help to get him up out of the wheelchair into the bed, and using the sliding board and all the things that came with it. Realizing that, okay, this is definitely not just like a one-off treatment thing. This is going to be a chronic issue. I decided we're going to buy a van. Bought a van for a wheelchair. And
Yeah.
then we decided before we went back to that mission, we were like, okay, we're going to go eat all the foods that we want to eat before he goes back in the hospital, because we knew this would probably not just be a very quick admission, and we honestly didn't know what was going to happen.
No.
I mean, at this point, I still thought he had ALS, so I thought, this is terminal, and this is it. So we went to a couple of our favorite restaurants. We had dinner. We went to Briquettes and had steak, and I had to cut a steak and feed him.
Yeah. I was in the
Because he
wheelchair,
couldn't
right?
eat it.
Yeah. We in the wheelchair. You wheeled me in there, cut my steak, fed me my salad,
Yep,
fed me my steak,
yep.
gave me a sip of wine or
I had to
two.
feed him there. Yep. I had to do all of it. So it was very disheartening, I guess, from my perspective, because it's just like you've tried really hard. Of course, I'm trying to be the strong one. Like, this is fine. It's okay. Everything's fine. We're going to figure this out. Don't worry. No worries. And putting a smile on my face and just being as positive. And inside, I just really wanted to like go sit in a room somewhere and scream and cry.
Yeah.
But that wasn't. I didn't have time for that. I had other things to do, and that was taking care of Jay.
Well,
So
I'm glad you were being a strong one, because I was freaking out at that point. It was just so
it was not easy,
unbelievable.
but
Yeah.
Yeah. So we go through. He gets readmitted. He gets plasma, and of course that's when all the real fun began because they have to put a subclavian, a big, large IV access into him to do the plasma, kind of like dialysis. One of the biggest risks of that is pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot in your lungs.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he gets his plasma treatment, and he does okay. He starts improving a little bit, and we were admitted for like I want to say 2 weeks.
It was, yeah, because remember that the Plex had to be every other day. So
So it was every so 10 days for Plex.
yeah, it was 10 days just for the Plex. Hey, and actually, before we jump
Right.
too far ahead, you talk about getting the line put in. So it was put in, was that my carotid? Or where did they put that?
Your subclavian.
Subclavian, yeah. And the physician that did that was somebody that Christy knew. And thank God for Dilaudid, because good God, she went poking around. What, it took her 3 attempts, and that wasn't because of her lack of skills, right? It's my body. We have come to find out doesn't cooperate with anybody on anything. And
right.
But also we would soon I can't even got a tongue twister there. Soon learn that it knocked a big piece of plaque that was in my vessel loose there, which come back to try to take me out. But yeah, so we got the Plex. Also, real quick, I'd say it's a funny story now. It's not funny because it messed me up. But injuring my shoulders on that second day of Plex, or the second Plex treatment, remember?
Yes,
Yeah.
because he didn't want the help to get up. He wanted to do everything himself, even though I tried to explain to him, part of like recovery, rehab, and doing all this is like allowing people to help you and rebuild things. But obviously, I didn't know what I was talking about. He knew much better than me.
I know better.
So he decides to lift himself out of bed using his arms. Well, when he did, he tore his AC joint in the shoulder.
Both shoulders.
And then he had to excruciate in both shoulders, but the right was really bad.
Yeah.
So then he had almost no function of his arms because his shoulders were messed up, and he was in this terrible pain. We had to have ortho come in. It was just like, really, one more thing. Like at this point, it's just like, you don't want to say it, but you want to say what else can happen. And it's just like one more thing happening to make our life even more difficult. So we started doing rehab. He finished his Plex treatment
and got moved.
We did date night in the hospital.
Yeah. I say after the Plex, so I was in the main part of the hospital for the Plex, and then so after the like 12, 14 days, they moved me to the inpatient rehab at the same hospital.
Right.
Which was a teeny tiny one, with like a whole 9 or 10 rooms. I think it was.
Yeah, it's not very big at all.
Home of your favorite nurse.
We get moved to the. I'll refrain from comments.
Yeah.
So we get moved to inpatient rehab, and we're going through the whole, like, we're being admitted, and they're telling us all the things that we're going to do. And I have not left Jay's side. Like, so during that admission, I actually stayed. I didn't leave at all.
Yes, you did.
I got close. I did go to work, so I was literally next door for work. But I would come after work. I would get us dinner. Most of the time, it was delivered because I didn't want to leave the facility, so I would get it delivered for us. And then I would come down, feed him, do bath and all the things that needed to be done, because it was just easier for me to bathe him and to do all the hygiene stuff instead of having the nursing staff do it.
Thank you for that.
And then literally I would sleep on that most terrible thing they call a couch recliner bed, which is awful. So I'd, sleep at night, and then I would get up in the morning. And when I get up in the morning, I would go get dressed and go to work right next door. And we did this the whole time. Pretty much did this the whole time all this happened, but the whole time. So I'm kind of tired and just kind of like, not sure where we're going with this. He is having some improvement, but we're still not where, any of us want him to be.
No, so, like I said, it was slight improvement. And
yeah.
So, you're talking about how you were sleeping on that godforsaken couch. And so it was, let's say we in the rehab and we feel, hey, things are leveling out a little bit. So it's like what, night 3 at the rehab. And
Right.
I convince you
And one
to
of
go home and sleep in your own bed, have a shower in your own shower, and get some rest because everything's leveled out, right? I've had the Plex.
right.
Things are going decent at rehab. Go get some rest, right? What could happen?
Right. So
Nothing could
he
happen.
convinced me that, you know, and I will say the nurse that was working the day shift, she was also, her husband had a stroke, so she had been a caregiver, so she understood, like, explicitly understood exactly what toll it takes on the caregiver's body, um, mind, and physically, mentally, spiritually. It takes such a
Hmm.
drain on you. And so she was like, please just go home. I promise nothing's going to happen. He's fine. He's fine. So I decided, okay, I'll go home and I'll get one good night of sleep. Well, I went home and got my good night of sleep. And the next morning, I'm all cheerful and everything. I wake up early. I go to Waffle House and I get us some good Waffle House breakfast. And I prance up in, you know, rehab in the morning, ready to take Jay his breakfast and feed him before I go to work. So only to be stopped by the nurse who was on shift that day, with a Miss Fassbender, wait, and to be stopped and told that there was an issue overnight, and they were waiting for, I think they were waiting for the physician to come up and do an evaluation.
Yeah.
But that Jay had gotten really short of breath, and was having some problems breathing. They did an EKG. So we looked at the EKG. So I was like, of course, like, what are we doing? What test have we done? What test are we doing? Who's coming up to see him? How long is this going to be? Like, all the things. This is before I even walked in the room. Like, already I've gone from being caregiver to being provider. So, or healthcare worker. So I
Yeah.
go in and he's literally tripoding on the side of the bed. He's gray. He's sweaty. He's got some oxygen on, and he looks like, I'm like, okay, this is probably it. Like, I'm not sure if he's had a big heart attack, if he threw, if he had a clot, he has a blood clot in his lungs. Like, I don't really know what's going on. I just know that wasn't happy about what had happened. So we
So I look like I was about to check out on you, huh?
yeah, I mean, it was pretty bad. I remember I texted my mom, and all I said was pray, and like the one word to her.
Yeah.
And she texted me back a couple hours later. She said, I've been praying since you said that. I obviously knew something had happened and something was going on. So I've been waiting to hear from you. Please just let me know everything's okay when you get a chance. And I'll continue to pray. So we go through the whole workup, and I'm like, what are we doing? We finally get the labs that we need. Of course, his one lab that kind of checks to see if you possibly could have a blood clot in your body was elevated. So he gets a CT scan of his chest. At this point, you're like, oh, well, you're inpatient rehab. You can't do this as an inpatient rehab. So we have to discharge you from rehab, readmit you to the hospital, do the CT scan, and then deal with everything. So we did, and we got sent back to the ER, actually. Being in the ER, got our CT scan, and they're like, you have a clot in your lung. So it's like, okay, awesome. And I was pretty, I would say, overwrought with myself that day because I had left the night before, and I entrusted his care into someone who had no idea what they were doing and should not have been at the bedside taking care of patients.
Yeah, that nurse, we didn't.
What happened later as I began to find out what happened is that, I mean, Jay woke up in the middle of the night feeling very short of breath. Well, the nurse just chalked it up to anxiety.
She told me I was having an anxiety attack. I needed to just calm down.
Right. Calm down. He's having an anxiety attack. And, they checked his, Jay asked for them to do EKG, asked for him to check his vital signs. And she did those things. And then she talked to the doctor that was on call, and she gave a report as if it was an anxiety attack. Like, hey, he's just having a lot of anxiety, blah, 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 blah. He looks fine, vitals are good, all the things that were not correct.
Yeah, of course, at the time, I had no history of anxiety, right? And I had just had a treatment where the number one complication from it is blood clots in the lungs, but shows you how good she read a chart there.
Typically, anxiety, doesn't wake you up out of your sleep having shortness of breath.
And
But
gushing sweat
so
and ashen gray.
I was just I'm overwrought, overstimulated, everything that day. It was just a terrible day. So I'm trying to make sure that he's taken care of. Trying to make sure that I don't go lose my job or go to jail and kill someone, and trying to be professional and completely forgetting about anything that I'm thinking. Like, I have no thoughts for myself at this point. And, eventually we get the diagnosis, we get Jay resettled back into a room in the hospital. And, I kind of get settled again. And I just literally, it was all I could do to not have a complete and total mental breakdown at that point.
Yeah, we went
I felt
ICU
so
at that point.
responsible.
They had moved me to cardiac ICU right at that point.
Right. And so at that point, I felt so, I, I don't know, devastated. I had given up. I had no hope. I was just like, I feel like the worst person in the world. This is my fault. If I wouldn't have left, we would have caught this earlier. We wouldn't be here, blah, blah, blah. So this is just putting us back on rehab. Now it's going to take longer. Then we have to go back to rehab once he gets well. And it's just a lot of thoughts going on that one night. I remember that night just being a very unpleasant night. Besides sleeping on that godforsaken couch, it was just unpleasant. I didn't sleep well.
Yeah,
But I do remember Jay waking up at around midnight and saying, I can breathe.
I can breathe. But and I told it, obviously I told it in, probably episode 2. But the whole thing is when I went to sleep that night, of course they had me sleeping straight up, right? Or sitting straight up, even though that was my sleeping position. And I couldn't catch a full breath, and my sats were, with the lower 90s. I think I was only hitting like 91 or something, my oxygen levels.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, man, praying before I went to sleep, like, God, just let me catch a breath. Let me catch a full breath. And when I woke up a few hours later, and that's when I woke you up, it's like, hey, I could catch a breath. And that was I call that miracle number 1 right there. Or maybe miracle 2, because that clot had moved,
Yeah. So we recover from the PE and all the things that went in with that, and then we go back to inpatient rehab again. And from a caregiver standpoint, I don't even know how I did this. I look back now and I'm like, I don't know how I just didn't crash and burn at some point. Because it was literally 24/7. I was at work taking care of patients, or I was at the hospital taking care of my husband. There was no break for me. That went on for months, but I don't know how I did it, but I did. And I think we all just kind of dig down deep when that happens. But I would like to say that there were many people who talked to me and said, being a caregiver is the hardest job. You have to take time for yourself. You can't help him if you're not taken care of. And I just blew that off because, I'm Superwoman and I need no one for nothing. I don't need anybody to help me. I got it. And looking back, I really wish there were a lot of people who were like, we'll come sit with Jay. We'll take a turn. Like, you go home. His friends, coworkers, like, everybody tried to help. And I just was so resistant to accepting help. And looking back, things would have been so much easier for me to process than if I would have accepted help than the way that I did it. Because eventually, long term, it turned out to be I turned out to have some really big issues dealing with it long term.
Yeah,
So
it damaged your mental health, mental and physical health.
Yeah, so I can say for caregivers, I've been there. I understand. I know what it's like. You don't want to leave your loved one, but literally, you can't sleep in a hospital bed every day for how many days, and you can't. Like, you need to get out of the hospital and you need to go home and get rest. There were some days like I literally didn't leave the hospital. I walked from the hospital through the adjacent connecting wing to my clinic and then back, and I never even went outside. Like, there was no fresh air, nothing. Like, I didn't. So it was just very depressing, to say the least.
Yeah.
And of course, mental tear on myself, mental wear down.
Yeah.
But again, me being the stubborn person I am, and I just was like, I'm not going to give into this. I'm not going to let anything, take over. take me over or not going to beat me. So we go back to inpatient rehab. We start doing rehab again. He improves a little bit. I remember we were trying to get him to, like feed himself, and it was the hardest thing to watch is like him, you know, uh, trying to put the chicken in his mouth with a fork and like couldn't get the chicken on the fork, and then me just having to sit there and watch him struggle so hard to just eat a piece of chicken, a chicken nugget. That it was that time I remember very vividly because the occupational therapist was in there with us, that I turned around because I turned my back to Jay looking out the window because I was about to lose it and just burst into tears. And I remember turning around, taking a deep breath, being okay, you've got to do this, just be strong, it's okay. So collecting myself together, turn back around, being encouraging for Jay, and then going back to work and doing it all over again. So we did that for 35 days.
Yeah.
And then Jay has another relapse. Or
No,
not a full relapse, but he's relapsing.
well, it was. I was going to say, because what happened, I remember coming back, they, still inpatient rehab, obviously. And I came back and, we normal routine, right? You'd get off work, you'd bring dinner. Thank God I didn't have to eat the hospital food all those months. But I remember, I don't know if you remember, but I remember it literally, the ride the lightning feeling in my body, right, was burning so bad in the fasciculations. And it was just, the worst it had ever been. And of course, we didn't know back then, we didn't know, well, hey, is that a good thing? Because, hey, I had a good workout and it's just the body responding to the workout. But it turned out to be, unfortunately, the next morning I woke up and couldn't move much of anything. And it turned out to be, what's that, relapse number 2 at that point?
Relapse 2.
Yeah. Woohoo.
So at this point, I was looking at research, deciding where we were going next, because obviously there's something going on, whether it's ALS or something, but we need to identify it into the diagnosis and we need a treatment plan. And the neurologist was basically like, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Insurance is going to continue to pay for you to be in rehab. So we're going to let you go home. We'll set you up with home rehab again. That's when I had to get a sitter service to come and sit with Jay during the day so I could continue to work.
Yeah. That poor sitter. But I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll, I tell you what, we'll go ahead and kind of start wrapping this one up here because that leads into a whole nother phase of the story. So,
right.
So what we'll do.
I'd just like to say,
go ahead, baby.
Literally, caregivers, please, 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 please take a moment for yourself. If you won't give up the entire responsibility, please take a moment and walk outside and just look at the sky. Just take a breath of air. Go sit outside and have a cup of coffee or a soda or whatever you may want to drink. Please. I wish that I would have done that because that would have helped me kind of unwind a little bit. I would have been able to process things myself, and I did not. So by me keeping everything inside and all I processed was what I was doing for Jay, how was Jay doing, what we were doing for Jay, it really, really caused a big problem for me later on.
No doubt. I'm sorry that I did that, baby. But you're right. That's if nothing else, though, like I said, we learned and by you sharing your story, people always talk about me sharing my story, but by you sharing your story from the caregiver's perspective, it's helping people. And like I said, hey, learn from, you've been through hell and back with that. And if nothing else, like I said, hopefully people that are going through that or, if they have to go through it, can hear your words echoing, right? To take care of yourself, take care of yourself, take care of yourself too.
I hope so, because really that's the biggest thing I wish that I would have done. And also I will say, I totally lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay, man. But
anyway, for caregivers, take care of yourself. Take a break and, just go sit outside if you won't give up sitting at the hospital for days on end or whatever it may be. Just take some time for yourself. It's very important.
So you're saying somebody shouldn't sleep on those terrible couches for 126 nights?
I am saying no sane person. with a good sense of reality, we do that.
126 nights on the couch during a pandemic. What else? What could happen, right?
What more could I want out of life?
Yeah, definitely some experiences I know we could both do without, but we have them. So we'll go ahead and wrap up there. And what we'll do, again, thank you for calling in on your lunch break, babe. We'll let you wrap up so you can still grab a bite and get back to the clinic. But you had one more message to caregivers that you had lost your thought earlier. What was it?
Right. My message to caregivers on top of taking care of yourself is you're going to have thoughts that are not pleasant thoughts, honestly, about how you don't want to be here. Why is this being done to you? Can I do this? I just need to walk away. I just want to leave and never come back. Those are completely normal feelings, and you should not have guilt for having those feelings. They are completely normal and completely expected. And by beating yourself up and causing yourself to feel more guilty just makes things so much worse.
Yeah, and that's what I told you too. Of course, it was in hindsight, but definitely no need to feel guilty. We found out how common that is. Now, I tell you what though, since because I'll edit this in there, and I know you're getting in the truck and you're getting ready to head back to the clinic. So, how cold is it up there right now?
Right now it is 16 degrees.
There you go, 16. But it's a warm 16 degrees, right?
It is. I mean, it's basically like sitting on the beach.
Any snow right now?
It is not snowing right at this second. It is kind of like this icy rain right now, but it's going to snow later today, and all the flights coming in and out of the island for the day have been canceled. So no one will be going anywhere.
Well, hopefully nothing happens that you have to try to get somebody flown off of there. So, all right, babe. Well, have a good day at work. Again, thank you for calling in on your lunch. And I know I'll like I said, I'll edit this in there so everybody can tease us when this has some kind of weird edit on it. But this is good. I'm telling you. And look, I got the whole hard drive thing figured out. So for everybody that's going, he recorded again, but it's going to crash. Look, this stuff's in duplicate now, so we shouldn't lose. I can't believe we recorded for 3 hours and lost it all. Good grief! Except for that one episode I had already cut. But thank you, baby. And I always like to finish. We talk about going through all of this and how man, you gotta have faith, right? When everything else was falling apart. Most days it seemed like that's all we had was our faith in Jesus to carry us through, because everything else was falling apart and just going haywire and completely out of our control. But at least we could control that, right?
Right.
So with that, I will tell everybody, man, trust. Like I always say, let Jesus be your burden bearer. You got to give it to him, though. You can't just say, hey, I trust. You got to truly hand it over. And because that still helps me to this day. And with that, baby, thank you again so much. And everybody, remember, live your spirit.